Hello, my name is Sam Havadtoy, and I have been working as an artist for the past 40 years. The first 20 in New York and the second half outside of Budapest in a small village in my studio. Creating art is a very complicated process for me, and yet I was very lucky because in 2018 I received 5 invitations from 5 different institutions to have an exhibition. Out of the 5, the most memorable for me remains the one at the Ludwig Museum in Budapest. The director, Ms. Julia Fabényi, approached me, offered me an exhibition with one condition, that it would be curated by an outside curator, Mr. Attila Nemes, because in fact, he was the one who brought the idea to her attention. His idea was to show my art, which was being created in the past 20 years in Hungary, in the context of my New York years. I was a little bit apprehensive of this idea, but in hindsight, I realized that that was the best approach and probably the most successful show in my career. He decided to insert artists' works who were in one way or the other involved in my becoming the artist that I am today. And I would like to take his approach in explaining my art to you. After moving back to Europe, settling down in Hungary, I set up my studio and I decided on a new idea or a new approach in creating my art. First, I started to write stories, then I edited down, make them very short, and paint those little stories on canvases. Once the stories were painted, I painted over them with the same color paint the stories were written by. And then I covered these stories with lace. They could be handmade or machine-made, it didn't matter to me, they just had to be old, used, worn. And then finally I painted over them. For me, these stories, which were about my life experiences, meetings, good, bad, indifferent, doesn't matter, became a little time capsule, and the lace became a sort of burial cloth. I don't know if you know, but in the south of Italy or in certain parts of Eastern Europe, when there's an open coffin, they cover the face with lace, so children would not have to see the face of the departed person, but people, loved ones who would like to, could lift the lace and look at the person one final time. So for me, this lace on top of my stories became a sort of burial cloth. This idea was working for several years. Sometimes painting figurative images, sometimes just very conceptual surfaces when it was finished. And one day I received an invitation, my first invitation in Hungary, to have a solo exhibition. Of course, it was a huge challenge, my first introduction to the Hungarian audience, and I wanted to create an installation where the works would be viewed as one work, but the paintings themselves would work as individual artworks as well. For this idea, I turned to Bobby Fischer and Boris Spassky, the game of the century. In 1972, in Iceland, Reykjavik, young Bobby Fischer challenged the ruling world champion Russian Boris Spassky, and the 41 paintings I have painted were the 41 moves it took Bobby Fischer to defeat Boris Spassky. Why? Is the story now. 72 is the year I arrived in New York, and I started to work in an interior design firm. First as an assistant, but by 1976 I was taking on small projects on my own. The word small was very important. One day, into our store walked John Lennon and Yoko Ono. They came into the shop because Yoko noticed 2 chairs in the window that she liked very much. While she was examining the chairs, John walked through the store, noticed an Indian antique chess set, and pulled me aside and asked me if I could bleach both sides white. I had no idea why he would ask me that, but of course I said yes. So he reserved the piece, and when I delivered the chairs to their apartment, he slipped me a piece of paper and asked me to have the board engraved. I did it, and with this, our relationship began. Within a short period of time, I was decorating 5 of their homes, and decorating is a very personal experience, and usually you become friends with your clients. For me, becoming friends with John and Yoko was kind of a dream come true. During this time, Yoko opened my eye to the contemporary art scene. Conceptual art, fluxes, avant-garde. We spoke a lot about these things. I finally saw her original white chess set, and she even took me to the Museum of Modern Art in 1978, and there I discovered something quite incredible, Marcel Duchamp's Ready-Made. It was one of Yoko's favorite artworks. The title was Fresh Widow. And that made me realize that word plays could become art by themselves. After John's murder, I spent more and more time with Yoko, trying to be helpful, trying to help her whichever way possible. One time we were opening fan mail. There were thousands and thousands arriving every week. And one of the letters I opened was from Bobby Fischer. He wrote a very nice letter to Yoko, but in the letter, he went on in detail that he thought Yoko should start playing chess, because during the game, one concentrates on the moves and blocks out all the outside interferences. We thought it was interesting, but didn't think much of it. I could play chess because in Hungary, all children learn to play chess. Then, a little while later, I suggested to her, why don't we try? And we did. And it became a ritual in our lives. We played, after a while, we were playing 3 times a day. Even when we were traveling, we were carrying a traveling board. We had permanent boards set up in New York and in my home in Budapest. So whenever we arrived, we could just sit down and play. It's a long story about chess. In the mid-90s, Yoko received an invitation to have an exhibition in Valencia, Spain. And she's a conceptual artist. So her ideas had to be executed by others. And her idea was to have, in one of the rooms, 6 of her white chess sets. I was the perfect person to execute her ideas because of my decorating background. I have all the resources and the workmen at my disposal. So I suggested to her that we would make not only 6 white chessboards, but chairs as well. And I recommended to use a suite of furniture by Joseph Hoffman. Those were the chairs and the table I sold to them years before, and they were in their bedroom. She liked the idea very much, so the pieces were made and the exhibition took place. I made not only 6, but a 7th, which then I installed in my apartment in my bedroom in Budapest. My life ended in New York and I moved back to Hungary. I was spending a lot of time in this bedroom looking at this board I made for her and look at the board that was in my living room that we used to play at. And chess became something very personal, very different to me. Chess is the ultimate mind game. People try to guess the other person's move and try to defeat it so it wouldn't happen. To me, chess started to represent love because it's a very similar exercise. We try to guess each other's moves, but we try to make them come true. So I thought it was the perfect installation to describe the years I spent in New York with this artist. And this is why I made the 41 moves called The Game. There's a little footnote to the story. The exhibitions traveled to Moscow, and Boris Spassky asked for a private viewing. Of course, I walked him through the exhibition. We were talking, small talk. He complimented on the exhibition. He liked the idea. So I asked him, was it true that the game ended at the 16th move? And the rest was just kind of an end game. He thought of it for a second, walked back to the beginning of the exhibition, slowly walked through the 41 boards again, slowed down at the 16th, then continued. Arrived to the 39th and said, you know, even here I thought I would manage to play to a draw. And that to me is kind of very interesting about relationships. How we think and where we are and how we are and what the reality becomes. It's another person's reality, not necessarily ours. Thank you.